Awesome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Semester's almost over. Thank you for having me back again. It's great to be back. I have, I think, 4 more weeks left of this semester. This semester's been a crazy one. I've been at 18 credit hours this entire semester, so it's 6 classes. It's been having me be up a lot of late nights, but it's almost over. Will you guys bow your heads and pray with me, and we'll get started today. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for every person in this room. Lord, we thank you for the weather as it's starting to turn a little bit colder and to give us a little bit of a break from this heat wave that we've been dealing with this summer. God, you're so awesome, you're so good. We pray that our hearts will be open for your word today. May this be your words and not mine. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen. The year has 52 weeks in it and 12 months. For those of us in the working force, we know that doesn't divide equally for our pay periods. We get paid on a normally bi-weekly or weekly manner, but somehow there just doesn't seem to be an equal distance between each pay period. For me, it seems to get around October that you start to get to alright, does the employer give you 3 paychecks in October, or do they pay you every 3 weeks in October? This 52 weeks, 4 pay period kind of thing, it all gets kind of jumbled up around the middle of the year. And it was at one of these periods at the time that my freshman year in college, I was sitting in my dorm room and one of my friends comes in and he sits down on my bed and we just start talking. You see, normal months have the bills due the 1st. You got rent due the 1st, you got electric due the 8th, and cable and and so forth and such with. This was one of those months, and my friend had paid all of his bills, but he wasn't going to get paid for a couple more days because he had to stretch that one paycheck he got at the beginning of the month to last 3 weeks. And so he sits down on my bed and we start talking. We're just talking about life and catching up, and slowly but surely, I start to get this vibe from him that he hasn't quite eaten in a couple days. But living in the dorms, we had a meal plan, and so you get 10 meals a week, and above that is up to you to figure out what you're going to eat, whether you eat out or grab some cereal for your dorm room. And so my friend is telling me how he had to pay the school for tuition and stuff, and he's got to go another couple days. He doesn't get paid till Monday, and this is Saturday night at 9 o'clock, and he's sitting there and he's like, man, dude, life kind of just sucks sometimes. And you're like, yeah. And so I start to pick up. He hasn't eaten since Friday at noon, which was lunch, and so he's probably really hungry. And so I'm like, all right, dude, come on, we're going to go for an adventure. So we hop in my car and we go down to the local Taco Bell. We get in there, and I can see the look on his face as he's like, oh, I'm not hungry. I'm not going to eat. Whatever you want, man. I'm just hanging out. I said, no, come on. It's on me. And so we go into Taco Bell and grab a couple of their burritos. They're a couple bucks. It's not really a big deal. But I tell you this story not so that you can see me and look at what I do for my friends. I help them out and I feed them. But I want to illustrate to you that no matter what you give, God can use it to impact people in ways that you have no idea. You see, this little couple dollar burrito that I given my friend while he didn't have money to go out and eat helped give him the strength and the hope to get through the weekend so that he could make it till Monday to when he got paid again and eat. What we have and what we are willing to give, God can use in ways that are so much more profound than we could ever imagine. Today we're going to be looking at the Gospel of Mark and the story that happens there. Mark was the first gospel to be written. We can tell this because Matthew and Luke both pull significantly from Mark in their writings and their stories. But we can also tell this because Mark is the shortest of all the gospels. You see, Mark is 20 pages shorter than all the other other gospel accounts. It's much easier to say that Matthew and Luke add to the gospel account than it would be for Mark to remove from the gospel account. Take this for example. A school teacher takes the lesson in the book for her students, reads it, and says, okay, I need to teach this to my students. And so she goes about researching other books and other methods and how to get this lesson across to her students. She doesn't just read them the book and say, all right, hope you got the lesson. Close the books, all right, time for homework. No, but the teacher takes the lesson and goes about researching it so that she can find better ways to help illustrate and help explain the lesson to her students. The Gospels do that in the same way. Mark was an eyewitness to Jesus as he goes about in his missionary journey. Mark is the one who is one of the 12 disciples, so he knows how these stories should be written. He reads Mark's Gospel account and he says, oh, this is so pure. It is so good. It is just the black and white of what is happening. I saw this. Let me add some color into it. And so Matthew and Luke start to color in, and that's why their gospel accounts get so much larger than Mark's. And we can see how Mark is the original one because it's the shortest, because he doesn't add in all the colors that all the other people add in. Today we're going to be picking up in chapter 8. And what is going on here is Jesus is teaching a crowd. And we kind of get the impression that Jesus is teaching such a profound message because the crowd hasn't eaten in 3 days. So you have this crowd who is sitting for 3 days listening to this man teach. Not even worrying about what they're going to eat. Not worried about how much time it's going to take. But they're just sitting here. And Jesus grows compassion towards the crowd. And this is where we're going to be picking up. So as we turn with our Bibles to Mark chapter 8, that is where we shall be reading. Mark chapter 8, verse 1. In those days, when again a great crowd had gathered and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from a long way away. And his disciples answered him, how can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place? So far in the story, we have a couple groups of people here. We have the disciples who are sitting with Jesus, and then we have the crowd. The Bible records that the crowd was 4,000 men in attendance. It's normal during that time for them to only record the men. So this was literally only 4,000 men. And I say only loosely, it's 4,000 men. So realistically, we could probably have numbers of anywhere from 9,000 to 13,000 people in attendance. Because if you think about it, you have the father, his wife, maybe 2 children, that's 4 people, and the Bible only recorded 1. So that's 3 more. Some households might have had more. They might have had 3, 4, 5 kids. But then other households might have only had 1 kid. Some single men might have just come to hear Jesus speaking. So we don't really know how many people were in attendance. We just know that there was 4,000 men. Above that, we could be realistically saying 13,000+ people in attendance. All right, so now imagine with me. We're going to imagine that we're in the crowd. There's a man in front of us, just a couple rows, because we got there early. We planned for this. We were there on time. So we see this man. He's a couple rows ahead of us. He's teaching. There might be a little bit of sweat on his forehead as he's just standing up there. It's been 3 days since he's been teaching. He might be growing weary, but you just sit there listening to his voice, not even shaking. Just so pure, so good. And we look to our left, and on our left, we see this person. They're sitting there. Their eyes are wide. They're just like on the edge of their seat. They're just like enamored with this man's teaching. And you look at them and you think to yourself, have they blinked in the past 10 minutes? I don't think they have. And so you start to get a little bit concerned because they're not blinking and you're like, oh no, what are we going to do with them? And then you look away quickly because you don't want to be staring at the person who's like not blinking. They're just like... And so you move on and you look to your right, and on your right you have this person who just, their head just buried, they're just scribbling. They're going super fast. They're trying to record every word that this man teaching because it's so important. And they start drawing diagrams and they're just going at it. And then you look next to you, you see your family. Your wife just sitting there, just at peace, as the whole family's all together. She's just listening intently to what this man has to teach. And then your children. For once in your life, you see your children just sitting there listening. Because the man who's teaching is teaching with such authority and such knowledge that even the children are able to understand and listen to it. And the longer you're listening, the more goosebumps you start to feel. Because this man is teaching about this God, this truth, this one true God. And so you start to get the feels, you start to get emotionally involved in this. You're understanding what this guy is teaching about God. You've never heard God be presented in such a way as this. Now, on the other hand, the other people involved are the disciples. They're up there with Jesus and they're helping him do the teaching. They've done this before. The Bible records that when the crowd again gathered, this wasn't their first rodeo. So we know they've come prepared. They're ready for this. They know Jesus is just going to be on a tangent again. I mean, he's done this before. So he gets in front of people and he just starts teaching, right? I mean, we just lose track of time. And he must be one of those preachers who preaches on and on and on. You're like, all right, when are you going to land the plane? They know this. So they've come with some provisions. They got some food to last them a couple days because they're like, this guy, We know Jesus, so we got to make sure we have food so that we can have energy to move on. But Jesus knows this. He knows his disciples came prepared. And so when he sees the crowd, he sees them growing weary, knowing that they haven't eaten in a while. He says, I can't send them away like that. I have to give them something to eat. So he says, hey, guys, what do you have? And they respond to him. They say, we have 7 loaves of bread. And this is just crazy, because how could this one guy ask for 7 loaves of bread and do anything with that? I can just imagine the look on Thomas's face, the disciple Thomas, just, but Jesus, this is our bread. What are we going to eat? And Jesus is like, how much do you got? 7? All right, we can make this work. And so with that, we have the call. God calls those closest to him to act. And we pick back up in verse 5. And he asked them, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7. And he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before the people, and they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said that these things and also should be set before them. In describing the crowd, Mark uses a rare and intensified form of the word for remain. We just read it in the English as remain. But when Mark is writing, he's writing with such intensity. This word is only used here in this kind of connotation. This word, prosmenusin. Prosmenusin is the Greek word that Mark is trying to illustrate this, that the crowd is intentionally remaining. They're not just remaining. They're not just sitting there. Like, okay, cool, sermon, when's it going to be over? This crowd is willingly wanting to be here at this time. They're intentionally sitting down, listening to this man. They're not just there by happenstance. So walk with me on this. We're back in the crowd. We're in the crowd mentality. We've got all the people as we look around. There's so many people, just a sea of people. You knew you'd have to come to travel a long way, so you brought some provisions with you, right? You had your little basket, you got enough food for the day, but you didn't realize that Jesus would be teaching for 3 days. And so now you're all out of food, and you start to wonder, you're like, hey, does they have any food? No, they don't have any food. Okay, no. Oh, so nobody has any food. This is great. How are we going to get home? As the man of the household, you're thinking, all right, well, I'm probably going to have to carry Sally and Susie here because they can't walk very far. So at some point, I'm going to have to pick them up and carry them. But how am I going to be able to continue to do that if I don't have the energy or the strength? And so you start to have this fear set in. But it's as if Jesus is teaching and he looks you right in the eyes. And he sees that in you. And he sees that worry in you. And he says, all right, we're going to take care of this. So he calls the 12 disciples and he says, hey, what do you guys have? In verse 5, he asks them, how much do they have? How much do you have, the disciples? And so they respond to him and they say, 7. The Bible doesn't record any hesitation. The Bible does not record their thoughts on this. The Bible just simply records that they say 7. Jesus says, hey, how much do you have? And they're like, oh, well, we got 7, Jesus. This is what we have to give you. That's all that we've got. They gave what little they had with no questions asked. And I think this is a great example of something to look at. They just gave. They did not know how on earth God was going to use what they had to give, but they just gave. God said, hey, I need you. I'm calling you to action. And so they just say, all right, here you go. Now, that's not to say that in their minds they would be thinking otherwise, like, oh no, how is he going to use 7 loaves of bread to do this? Now, this is something that's going to be hard to wrestle with. This idea of just giving. You know, I know for me personally, when I try to give, I'm trying to see, all right, how can God use this? I don't even imagine that God can just take something simple that I have and use it in unexplained ways. I just start to think humanly. I start to think on how can my gift, what I'm giving, tangibly affect those. And I want you to know that's okay to wrestle with this idea of how can what I'm giving glorify God? How can it do anything for God? Just imagine what the disciples would be wrestling with. The Bible does not record this, but just think about their thoughts. Doubting Thomas. Oh no, we're not going to have any food. It's all over. We might as well quit now. Oh no. Or what about Judas? We think about Judas just sitting there, just immediately dollar signs in his eyes. He sees, he's like, ooh, got a business opportunity here. If I charge each person in the crowd this much, we can make this much, and that will provide us with this much resources. Or what about Peter? We all know Peter outwardly is just Jesus' fanboy. Yeah, Jesus, yeah, here's 7 loaves. Yeah, here we go. But inside he's just like, he can't do it. He's not going to do it. I don't know this guy. Who is this guy? I mean, but those thoughts are so important to know that God has a plan. Yes, these thoughts are present in our heads. Yes, they were possibly present in the disciples' heads. But thinking about that, and then seeing how God takes those 7 loaves and what he uses them to do to feed the crowds is so profound. And this is where our story is going to pick back up. To his disciples' amazement, Jesus breaks the bread, gives thanks to God, and says, hey, start passing it out. And so now we're called, so we see what happens next in verses 8 and 9. And they ate and they were satisfied, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And they were about 4,000 people, and he sent them away. They ate and they were satisfied. 7 loaves of bread and 5 fish fed 4,000 men. Theoretically, 13 plus 1,000 people ate that day because they were faithful. They did not just eat, but they ate and they were satisfied. They had baskets upon baskets left over. You see, guys, when we give our gifts to God, he not only uses them, but he multiplies them. And he takes them and he uses them in such ways that we can't even fathom. Who could have thought that 7 loaves of bread would have fed 13,000 people? I know I wouldn't have. And I know sometimes in my giving, I struggle with that. I just think about my tithe check and I'm like, oh, it's not that much. How could God possibly use that little amount? Or when I go and I take somebody out to lunch, I'm like, it's just a Taco Bell burrito. How could God use that? But it's our gifts and our willingness to give that God takes and he multiplies it. And he takes it on a completely different journey than we would have even been able to fathom. Church, each and every one of us in here is a part of the body. We all have different gifts to be given. It can be easy to be swept up with the idea that it's just writing a check is giving. That just writing a check is the only way to giving. And we can get caught up in this idea that that's it. But I want to tell you there's more to giving. There's more to being generous than just thinking, oh, well, I got to sell a family boat so that the next building campaign the church comes across, that they can have the money from the boat and that I can look good in front of the church. No. Giving is so much more. We're all part of the body. We all have different attributes to bring to God. Some of us, that might be going into our pantry and grabbing a couple cans of soup and giving it to the local homeless shelter. For some of us, that may look at like preparing a turkey dinner, because we might be good cooks and we can cook a turkey dinner for the neighbor that can't afford it. Some of us, that might be giving of our money. But regardless of what we are giving, if we give it to God, God can use it in such profound ways. Money is not the only way that we can give. We have so much more. Now I say this to tell you that God uses those closest with him to bless the majority. He takes what we have. He takes our part of the body. And when we give it to him and we surrender it to him, God takes it and multiplies it. Those disciples, they said, we got 7 loaves of bread. And God said, all right, watch me feed 13,000 people with 7 loaves of bread. It's just crazy. Today we took at what it looked like to be in the crowd. We walked through this imagery of seeing the people next to us and just trying to see what it would feel like to be in a crowd while Jesus is teaching. We saw how drawn in we would have been and how many people would have been there. And after that, we looked at the disciples' role during Jesus' teaching. Their role was to supply the bread. That's what they had to be giving. They had to be willing to give all the food that they had so that God could be glorified and that God could show his power among his people. Then we heard those words. And God said, what do you have to feed them? And his disciples were like, all right, it's our chance to give our 7 loaves. I know, God, I don't know what you're going to do with it, but here you go. Here it is. And then finally the miracle. Everyone in the crowd ate and they were satisfied. No matter what we have to offer, God can use it to further his kingdom. Church, as we leave today, I'd like to challenge us to be looking for ways that God can use us this holiday season. We're about to enter probably some of the hardest times for a lot of people out there. The holiday season can be rough. Those people who struggle to provide to meet and make ends meet. Those people who struggle to even put food on the table. The holiday seasons are not always this happy, joyous time. But church, as we leave here today, I pray that we can be looking at ourselves and looking at our abilities and what we have to give, and that we can find a way to use that this holiday season so that we can take what we have our 7 loaves of bread, how seemingly insignificant it is, and how we can use that. How we can use our gifts, no matter how small, to further God's kingdom. As a body, we have many parts. I don't know what your part is. I don't know if it's going out and helping the neighbor rebuild their fence, or if it's cooking for the neighbors, or if it's going to the local homeless shelter and just giving of your time. Whatever that looks like for you, is my prayer that today, as we leave these walls, we can know that we can be praying throughout the week that God may use us in the way this holiday season. So will you bow your heads and pray with me? Dear Lord, thank you for every person in here. God, we pray that as we walk out of these walls, as we leave the building known as the church, that we can continue to be your hands and feet, that we can continue to be the church, God, that we may go out into the community, and that once we are out there, and once we are in there, we can look for the needs. And Lord, that we may be encouraged that no matter how insignificant our gifts may feel, no matter how small they seem, that you can give us strength and encouragement, because knowing that you took 7 loaves of bread and fed 13,000 people, that we too can be giving, if we're willing to give our gifts to you, Lord, that you can take it and multiply it and use it in your kingdom. It's in your name that all God's children pray. Amen.